Well, just like it was in the Second Republic, a former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Professor Charles Soludo, was third time lucky as he has been declared winner of the governorship election in Anambra State, southeast of Nigeria. Soludo, a professor of economics, erudite scholar and technocrat, got his wish on the third attempt after losing in 2009 and getting disqualified by his party in 2013. His election is seen as an ample opportunity for a technocrat in governance, and what becomes of his tenure may be the new measure and impetus in governance. More than Soludo's victory, the conduct of the elections and the response of the people left reasons for discourses. Now, welcome to VSA. I'm Sulaiman. Well, the Anambra State governorship election wasn't without the usual political fireworks and theatrics that have become regular features in a Nigerian election. Now, debates were held, points were advanced, permutations were made, predictions were recorded, but the final say was left to the people. Chukwuma Charles Soludo of the All Progressives Grand Alliance, APGA, governor of Nigeria's apex bank for 5 years, has been declared the governor-elect of his state, Anambra. He defeated 17 other candidates to emerge, including the People's Democratic Party and the All Progressives Congress. He won more than 44% of the total votes cast. His emergence didn't come on a platter of gold, as he dealt with numerous court cases, a gale of defections from his party, and intra-party squabbles. But he emerged victorious at his end. Now, while Soludo's victory is creditable and hardly debatable, the unimpressive turnout of voters in the election is a new low and a great source of concern. Joining me on the square today is Liborous Oshoma. He's a legal practitioner and a public affairs analyst in Nigeria. Emmanuel Onwubiko, National Coordinator, Human Rights Writers Association of Nigeria. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Now, let's start with you, Liborous. This is one election that you have also been watching closely. You have also spoken about it before the election. Now, tell us how you rate the election overall. Do you think there are improvements on previous elections, specifically in Anambra State?
Yeah, thank you very much. The improvement in terms of election here, we talk about the improvement. I do not see, I want to benchmark the improvement from the Edo and Ondo election. Edo election for me ought to have kick-started, a paradigm shift and a new form of transparency in our election management. But using that as a yardstick, I think that the Anambra election dropped the ball a little bit below what happened in Edo. Maybe as a result of this security in the state before the election, but if you benchmark it against the general election, you would say that indeed there was a marked improvement. But benchmarking it against what happened in Edo, I would say that INEC needs to do more, especially against, the failure of the biometric capturing machine. I had expected that by now that we ought to have moved past all of that.
Let me bring in Emmanuel here. Emmanuel, quickly, I'll pose the same to you. You have also been a close watcher of this election, following, developments in Anambra State. So, your rating would help Nigerians and Africans have a better understanding of how it went down in Anambra State.
Yes, thank you very much. I think the Anambra State governorship election has made tremendous improvements in several areas, several key areas. First and foremost, the Anambra State governorship election afforded the electorate, the voters, the opportunity to turn back and to reject absolutely the attempts by certain candidates to buy their, their votes. Some of them actually were very emphatic in rejecting the offers of financial inducements and went for their choice. Then secondly, there is a tremendous improvement in the area of maybe organization in terms of how the kind of strategy that was put in place by the security operatives. There is a little bit of improvement in terms of the organization, but they need to do a lot more in the area of posting and redeployment of security operatives to man the to man the election, because it wasn't actually a very good performance on the part of the police, in spite of the fact that we were told that there was this massive redeployment of police officers. So I think over 40,000 armed security operatives were mobilized and sent to Anambra State. But even with that overwhelming number of security operatives, they were unable to guarantee the people the kind of peaceful atmosphere that they deserve or that they demand in order for them to exercise their right to choose who they want to choose. It took them over 2 days before a decision could be reached, and this is not a very good sign. It's not a good sign, because if it took INEC 2 whole days to organize election in only one state, with the kind of massive deployment of police that Nigerians saw, police operatives, the civil defense, the paramilitary forces, and all kinds of security forces, if it took them 2 days to organize just one election, to choose one governor for a state that is not as large as Borno State, then maybe we need to start preparing to invite the entire police forces of Economic Community of West African States.
Allow me jump in here, Emmanuel, because I know you're speaking on areas that concerns your operations, and as a human rights writer, you're trying to look at the issues of rights of citizens and the electorates in this particular election. Perhaps let's bring in Liborous, who also help us here make sense of what led to this. Some Nigerians and Africans have said that this could be because of the reasons of the insecurity in Anambra State. We're talking about things leading up to the election. There were skirmishes and some agitations by some non-state actors. Isn't that why the Nigerian government decided to have such amount of boots on ground to prosecute this election that has been termed relatively peaceful? I think you have to unmute yourself.
Mind back.
Good. I can hear you now.
Yeah, I agree with you, but let me take our mind back to Section 178 of the 1999 Constitution, on the ground that INEC had no other option but to declare the election inconclusive. That because the section is clear that where in an election to the office of a governor of a state, one or two or more candidates nominated for election, a candidate for an election to the office of governor shall be deemed to have been duly elected to such office, where being the candidate nominated for the election, he has majority, whereby the only candidate, basically, so that I don't waste our time, but what I'm basically saying is that for you to be declared a candidate for an election, you must have scored at least 25% of the votes in at least 2/3 of the local government. And we also know that in Ihiala local government, you had about 148,000 registered voters, even though INEC had declared that they had about 52,000 persons that collected the permanent voters cards. So, but INEC could not assume that all registered voters will not come out to vote on that day. And so, in compliance with the provisions of the law, that election had to be declared inconclusive. But I also will agree with my colleague that the essence of having that number of policemen on ground was to ensure that there were no, skirmishes and insecurity on the day of election. So, to have prevented for the security, the number of security personnel on ground, to have allowed the insecurity that happened in Ihiala local government to the extent that INEC officials could not deploy materials. Sulai, remember I told you that on Sunday also, to have prevented INEC from declaring materials to Ihiala, for me was a minus for the policemen that were on ground. But quickly, I also want to look out for, unfortunately, this, I have said it consistently and I will repeat it again, that is either our population is over bloated or that we just do not understand what it means, what political powers mean in Nigeria. Anambra State has a total population of about 11.4 million people. And of the 11.4 million people, you have a registered voter of about 2-point-something million. Total number of registered voters is about 2.4 million. On the day of this election, you have a total number of valid votes, 229,000. That's about invalid, rejected votes, 7,000 plus. That means that you have about 230-something thousand people deciding the fate of 11.4 million people. So what it means, you have 2% of the people deciding the fate of the entire 11 million people. So it's either the people still do not understand what it means that 2% of the people have decided to take decisions for the entire state. And that for me is shameful. It means we still do not understand the import of political leadership in a democratic setting. And that's why, despite all the finances, all the deployment that we have seen, yet the people, fear, palpitation, and the heightened insecurity. Maybe in 2017, at least we had about 22% of voters. But in this one, it is a shameful, abysmal 9% of the population that voted. So it's a decline. And what that means is that insecurity, despite the deployment of policemen, a lot of people were still scared of the insecurity. And then the police also could not truly prevent insecurity in some local government like Ihiala that we saw. And it is quite unfortunate. Let
me bring in Emmanuel here quickly. Emmanuel, looking at what Liborous has highlighted, that is voter apathy, which we have seen that accredited voters, 253,388. And of course, in all of this, it means that, the destiny or the future of over 5 million people have been determined by just less than 300,000. So how do you come to terms with this if you put this side by side with what we've seen in Anambra and what Nigeria is preparing for in 2023? Do you still think that the issue of sensitization and insecurity, could well have played a big part in the voter apathy we have seen in Anambra State?
Yeah, well, there are several factors that you have to look at, particularly with this Anambra State governorship election. First and foremost, if you have any occasion of registration of voters, some of the political parties, they will go into the field, they will mobilize prospective voters from all parts of the country people travel from far and near to go to their respective towns and villages to try to register in order to find time during the elections to travel down again to participate in the electoral process. So you can see that the logistical nightmares that most of these voters would have to go through sometimes is not what the kind of effort that you expect them to put in. You know, you expect somebody to travel all the way from Lagos to go to Anambra State to go ahead of time to participate in the election, and it's not always as easy as that because of logistical issues. So in terms of the percentage of voters that actually turn out to participate in the Anambra governorship election, I think is a very commendable step, because even if you want to look at it from the issue of, say, just less than how many percent of the voters that registered turn out to vote, you also have to ask, what about the primary elections that were conducted by the political parties? Some of them made a claim that they got over 350,000 voters participating in those primary elections. So it's not a question of, it's not all about the question of apathy, so to say. You have a lot of factors that actually, inhibited the fuller participation of voters in Anambra State election, aside the issue of insecurity, aside the issue of several, threats, and there were a lot of tensions all over the place, and I think we really need to commend the voters that actually turned out to participate in that election, because they actually passed through a lot of challenges.
I see the point here. If you allow me comment again, apologies for butting in. Liborous, listening to Emmanuel here, one key thing here has to do with the numbers that have been bandied about in this election. Leading up to the election were primaries, and some of the leading candidates all came out to tell the world that they had over 300,000 people who cast, their ballot in their favor to make them emerge as their party's candidates. Now, looking at the overall figure of what this election has shown, is less than 300,000. So even if all politicians in Anambra State were to come out to vote, then you will be getting over 2, 3, 4 million. So make sense of all of these figures we get from politicians when they say their victory has been an overwhelming one by votes they got from their political parties.
Sulai, fantastic question. But you see, it didn't start today. That is why some of us feel that these direct primaries by political party is a fraud. If you remember, even in President Buhari's election, direct primaries, APC informed us that Buhari scored more than 50 million votes for direct primaries. And you wonder how, they were able to go around and conduct all those direct primaries that they did. We also see it in every state where they allegedly had direct primaries. Also, if you look at the numbers, right from 1999, in 1999, Anambra State, for example, the total number of actual voters in the election in 1999 was about 44%. In 2003, it increased to about 49%. And if you remember, at that time, we had names like Bill Clinton, George Bush in our electoral register. The moment in 2011 that Jega came and said that we're going to at least to start, having a credible election, let us even clean the electoral register, the numbers started dropping. If you remember also, at that time, INEC did what they call automated fingerprint identification system. And the numbers of registered voters in those various states dropped drastically. And 2015, we saw also, when card reader was introduced, the numbers, apart from some states in the north where you have underage voters, the numbers of actual voters consistently kept dropping. So that's why I have said that it's either, I agree with my colleague that yes, a lot of people travel back home to register during the election, but that number of those that go home to register will not be more than at least 20%. So you still have at least another 80%. But on the day of election, you find out that the total number had never gotten up to 50%. So it's either you have a manipulation of the electoral register for the purpose of financial gain, or that we truly are not as populated as we claim to be. And then lastly, politicians can do anything. That is why no political party in Nigeria has a credible register. They all have cooked up register with all kinds of names. And then you'll be shocked that it is the same people that are in this, that we vote in APC primaries, that will still vote in PDP primaries, that will vote in Anambra primaries, as reflected in the election figure. Because you'll be wondering, if the total number of actual voters by INEC standard, these are standards that have been filtered and using technology, if the total number is not up to 230,000, and yet in the political primaries, some parties had 300,000, you now begin to wonder where the numbers came from. So those numbers are fraudulent. And I think what this also has shown is that there is need for us to consistently use technology to determine, the outcome of our election. And that will also filter down, a lot of frauds that we see during the election.
Let me quickly bring in Emmanuel again. And Emmanuel, it has to do with some of the key concerns you raised. And, some lives were lost during this election, including that of 3 policemen who the governor-elect has dedicated his victory to. How can Nigeria start having an election without some of these sad reports?
Exactly. And look, that is one of the reasons why a lot of people, when you have elections, a lot of people choose to just stay on their own and say they don't want to go through these troubles of going to, you have to stand in the sun, you have to spend so many hours, trying to vote for somebody. You don't even know his blueprints for developing your place. So these are some of the issues. And I want to say that it is not exactly correct that most of those figures that we hear are exaggerated. They are not. They are not, because there are factors. There are factors that sometimes necessitates the sharp reduction in the the percentage of turnout of voters. There are so many factors, human factors, the issues of logistics, the issues of maybe you just change you're no longer interested in the election apathy. You're just not interested, because how do you just waste your time? You travel all the way from Lagos to Oka to go and participate in an election that you don't even know what will actually happen at the end of the day, and you spent several hours standing in the queue. So this boils down to the critical question of what is the level of commitment of the political parties towards raising the conscientizing voters, mobilizing voters and getting them effectively, getting them interested in participating during the elections. And as you mentioned the other time, the issue of some policemen that were killed during the elections, I think is something that the political elites really have to look at, because why do you have to waste human lives because the state is making an arrangement to organize an election? Then we just can't control the problems of political thuggery, the violence that characterize the campaign periods, and the rest of them. I think it's quite unfortunate, and it's pathetic. It's something that should occupy our time, we should really think about how to bring this kind of problems to a manageable level, because it is not very encouraging at all.
So, Liborous, isn't this a manageable situation already? Because some still think that looking at some of the innovations from INEC, for instance, the bimodal voter accreditation system, the BVAS, is another reason why we have seen less acrimony, less violence in this election. Tell us about some of the key things that INEC has done. You know, specifically, before this elections, there was Ondo, Edo, and now Anambra. Let's go through the improvements of INEC in conducting elections just lately.
Yeah, apart from the beavers, first and foremost, before I go into that, I would want to say that except, like I consistently said, except the people do not understand the import of political leadership. You can't tell me that you're not interested in who governs you. You allow 9% of the population to determine who will govern you. Then you do not understand what governance or government is really about. Because a situation where consistently you have the worst of us ruling the best of us, and then you have opportunity to decide who governs you, to make it right, you say you want to stay away because you don't have interest. I doubt it. So there definitely is a problem with the number. Then secondly, INEC over time had consistently, just like Eleke the bird, had said, look, if the hunters learn to shoot without missing, then I will continue to fly without perching. INEC had consistently innovated to ensure that there's transparency in the election. We saw them in Edo, how the Z-pad, a device they called Z-pad, was introduced, where we even saw it now in Anambra, where the moment election results are announced at the polling unit, a photograph of that result sheet is snapped and uploaded on the what you call INEC Z-Pack. And so, because usually collation, where rigging usually takes place between polling units and at the collation center, where figures will be changed and manipulated. And that's why a lot of people are saying, largely what happened in Anambra is a reflection. Anambra is a reflection of the conduct of the election in the states, because we saw how result sheets were displayed, using the INEC Z-Pack. So in that vein, one would have expected that a lot of people would participate more. We saw it happen in Edo. We also saw it happen in Anambra. Secondly, we also saw how INEC had innovated using the BVAS technology to ensure that, unlike before, they will tell you that where the card is not is malfunctioning, they will resort to incidents form. But in Edo, from Edo election, they had introduced, they had cancelled out incidents form and consistently had used the BVAS to accredit voters. We saw it in Anambra, which was what even delayed the governor-elect from voting because of the non-functionality of the machine. So these are innovations that should win, people's confidence. And then lastly, you saw the debate between INEC and the National Assembly on transmission of electronic result electronically. And INEC copiously had quoted Section 160 of the 1999 Constitution, claiming that section empowers them to conduct election in the way and manner deemed fit. And any law that will alter that powers as spelled out in that Section 160, to the extent of its inconsistency, would be null and void. At least, the National Assembly, had to allow reasoning and the constitutionality to prevail. So these are improvements that INEC had consistently made in ensuring that we have transparent election. So it is now left for the security personnel to ensure that there's security on ground on the day of election, because if you can deploy 32,000 people to Anambra, and yet you still had the kind of crisis that you had to the extent that, some policemen lost their life. What if you are now conducting an election in the entire country? That means, like my colleague has said, you will need, policemen from Benin, Cotonou, and all everywhere to police Nigeria. So I think transparency, consistency in what INEC is doing would eradicate all of this manipulation. And the only way we also can encourage INEC is to also have faith in the process.
All right, Liborous, as Nigerians have faith in this process, we'll take a moment. When we come back, I'll let Emmanuel speak more on rights, especially of those who were in that election. And specifically, Liborous, you also will be helping us make sense of history that is about to repeat itself for the governor-elect of Anambra State. It was the Second Republic politician who first made history. First time central bank governor during the regime of Yakubu Gowon, who later on became governor of the state of Cross River in Nigeria's southern region, Clement Isong. Now Nigeria is having another CBN governor coming in on the saddle as a politician and technocrat. That's when we return. Join us again. Well, it's less than 2 years to the 2023 election, and there are doubts about the readiness of the country's electoral umpire, INEC, to hold a free, fair, and credible election. Now, while the credibility of the emergence of Professor Soludo is being contested by the APC, many observers have said the will of the people will prevail. Now, typically of every Nigerian election, the judiciary still has a huge role to play in the aftermath of the election. The veracity of INEC's results and its credibility has often been left for the courts to have a final say on, causing many Nigerians to raise questions on its capacity to hold elections. I still have with me on the square Liborous Oshoma and Emmanuel Onwubiko. Quickly here, let's start with you, Emmanuel. You know, almost every election result is taken to the court in Nigeria. Do you see in any way if this is a pointer to the weakness or otherwise of INEC or just a show of overzealousness by some politicians?
Well, I think most of those cases that are taken to election tribunals, most of them sometimes are built around technicalities. Maybe politicians just trying their luck, trying to see if they can obtain the verdicts that the people have actually made in some of those elections. And I in this particular Anambra State governorship election, I don't see any way for any of those political parties that participated in the election going to any court to seek for any sort of redress, because the election was completely free, fair, in as much as the election was not totally devoid of certain, problems that are associated with the manner we conduct election in Nigeria. I think the election is, the results are unassailable, except for somebody maybe somebody who has a lot of cash that he wants to waste or want to give to lawyers to try to see if he can just gain any kind of advantage from the court of law. I do not see the possibility of any of those rival political parties going to court to seek for any kind of redress from this election, because the election was just very sound, just okay. And look, the issue of post-election litigation is one of those discouraging factors. One of those factors that discourages a lot of Nigerians from actually participating in some of those elections, because they say, well, even if we come out and spend all the time to vote for the candidate that we want, at the end of the day, if care is not taken, the right to make our choice may be abridged or taken away by the courts of law, basing their conclusions on some kind of strange trying to see how they can destroy the decision that have been reached by the majority of the voters during the elections. And some people say, well, why do I have to waste a lot of time, trying to vote for the candidate of my choice? And at the end of the day, one clever politician will just get some, clever lawyers that he can pay a lot of money that will go to court to try to see how they can upturn those decisions that they have made as the electorate. But I think, and I believe strongly that it's not going to be the same case with the Anambra governorship election at all. I don't see
Emmanuel, let me stay with you before I go to Liborous. I'll also let Liborous react to that because he's a lawyer. So since we have a lawyer with us, he should also react to that. But quickly, let me stay with you. Looking at the electorates, those who came out to cast their ballots, I saw a lot of senior citizens, the elderly, in Anambra. They made a good show on the day of this election. Did you record any rights abuses on the day of election, by some of these people, the elderly and persons with disabilities?
Yeah, I think from the reports we have been receiving from observers who were accredited to observe the elections, there are no too many incidents of human rights violations that occurred during that election, because there is significant improvement in the area of policing. Security improved a little bit. And when you have security, those who ought to man the security of elections, when they are actually properly supervised to carry out their mandate during the elections, you have a sharp reduction in the cases of violations that occur during those elections. Apart from very few cases of journalists who were harassed here and there by some political talks, and apart from the few cases of attempts that were made by some rogue electoral officers to disappear with some sensitive materials, like the results, 40, I think the result of 40,000 voters that somebody made away with, so we can actually say that.
Okay, let me quickly, sorry again to cut you here. Let me quickly bring in Liborous here, who's a lawyer, to weigh in on this before my next question to Liborous. Liborous, you've heard Emmanuel, and it has to do with must every politician go to the court after an election? It looks like the in thing in Nigeria.
Yeah, but gradually that belief is fading gradually because we saw in Edo how after the election, the candidates congratulated, the candidate of the APC congratulated the winner and said he wasn't going to go to court. And how also in Ondo, even though the party eventually went to court in Edo, but they hinged their petition on technical grounds, as regards nomination and all of that. In Ondo, it was the same thing. Because of the introduction of the usage of technology, we also saw how the candidate congratulated the winner and said they weren't going to go to court. But eventually, their party went to court and hinged their, election petition on technicalities also. Gradually, when you elevate the election proper, beyond what, human manipulations, it will become difficult, confronting those elections with the present provisions of the Constitution and the Electoral Act, to upturn same. So it will be an exercise in futility to go, dispute, the outcome of the election, especially given, what happened on the field and the fact that for a winner to be declared, in an election, you must have scored the number of the highest vote and, also scored the required spread. So that's why you find out that most of their ground these days are on technicalities and not necessarily on what transpire on the day of voting. And basically, that will fade away over time because if you look at the 2019 general election also, apart from the case of apart from the case of Zamfara and Bayelsa, the technicality of failure to submit, the names of candidates at the right time, and then on the qualification of candidates, elections generally held, and the tribunal, I can't remember, the tribunal actually, apart from one isolated case in Calabar, the senator in Calabar, on that was not on the outcome of the election, but on nomination also. I cannot remember the election tribunal upturning, any election. So that gradually will also teach politicians not to unnecessarily go waste their money at the tribunal. I've also seen cases where...
Go ahead.
I've also seen cases where, politicians, will after the election, the lawyers will naturally come to them because lawyers make fortune out of people's misfortune. And then they come to you and say, look, let's approach the tribunal. I've seen cases where the politicians will say, well, I would be ready to approach the tribunal if I wouldn't have to pay you money, because from what transpired in the election, and also going by the provisions of the Electoral Act, vis-a-vis the interpretation that the Supreme Court had given provisions of the Electoral Act consistently, and on the ground also that any result declared by INEC is presumed, consistent with the outcome, then if you're ready to foot the bill. So you see a lot of politicians gradually shine away from approaching the tribunal for election, except on technical grounds, really.
Let's do a bit of history here, Liborous, and I want you to help us. It's almost 42 years ago when Nigeria first saw a banker, politician, more specifically the former governor of Central Bank of Nigeria, elected as governor of the state of Cross River State, Dr. Clement Isong. And today in Anambra, another professor of economics who was also a former central bank governor has also been elected a governor. Put this side by side with what we saw in the year 79 to 83 when Clement Isong was governor in Cross River State.
Basically, if you look at, first and foremost, let's look at the pedigree of both of them. Clement Isong, who was a CBN governor from 1967 to 1975 or so under General Yakubu Gowon, was a seasoned banker, schooled in Harvard also, and a seasoned banker. Unlike Professor Chukwuma Soludo is an economist, also, had a bit of study in America, a bit of study in America also after, from graduating to first class in a University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Both of them, are reformists. You could say that the era of Chukwuma Soludo saw a lot of reform at the CBN, and also the era of Clement Isong, who succeeded Alhaji May Borno at the CBN, also saw, a lot of, reforms at the CBN at that time. And remember, Clement Isong contested for election under a progressive party, under the Conservative Party in 1979. That was the MPN. He was the governor of the MPN in 1979 Cross River State. ABGA is not, a conservative party in modern day Nigeria. So you would say, Chukwuma Soludo, even though he was in PDP, and you can say PDP is likened to the MPN of those days. So there's really no major departure between them. It's just that, history is gradually repeating itself, or has repeated itself, and one would have expected, one would have seen more. Even though, Alhaji Malam Adamu Shiroma, who succeeded Clement Isong at the CBN, we saw him go into politics. He also became a finance minister, but he never became a governor of any northern state until today that you're having Chukwuma Soludo as governor-elect. So one would expect that a lot of, our technocrats should go into politics like we had in 1979. If you remember, in 1979, we had a lot of technocrats as governors in both, some of them in the Conservative Party, and then also Socialist Party like the UPN. You had Professor Ambrose Ali, in the UPN. You had Adebisi Onabanjo. You had Lateef Jakonde. And then you had people like Clement Isong also in MPN. You had
let me butt in a bit here, Liborous, because now taking Nigerians and Africans down memory lane, it would seem as if the Second Republic was, immensely populated by technocrats. So what's the deal now with Nigeria's democracy? Because sometimes Nigerians are worried about those who put themselves, for political offices. There seemed to be a clear departure from what Nigerians saw in the Second Republic and now.
Because from the Second Republic, you still had a little bit of fallout of the leaders that we had in the First Republic. You had the likes of Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe of the Nigerian People's Party. You had the man who's known as politics without bitterness, Alhaji Ibrahim Waziri of Great Nigerian People's Party. You had Chief Obafemi Awolowo. You had the former teacher who became the president, Alhaji Shehu Shagari. And then Tuji Braithwaite, who later came, on board of the PR of NAP. And then you have, the Reverend, Aminu Kano from the North. All of these people, their politics was based on ideology flowing from the First Republic. And then you had political participation from people who had, a stake in the political party because they contributed to the political parties. They were paying their dues to the political party. But like today, you see people carry party cards, like we were just talking about party membership, and the number of voters on the day of party primaries. You see people banding party cards around, but they do not even know. They have never contributed a kobo one day to their political party. And then in the First Republic also, we're not talking about technology then, but the elections were more, even though you still talk about massive rigging under the MPN, you hear landslide and moonslide in 1983, but it was not, as fraudulent as we have today. Yeah, you could still talk about ballot box stuffing in 1983 that led to the ouster of the then democratic process by President Muhammadu Buhari. But you had, in 1979, the election was more transparent. The election could not be called on the first run. So if you remember the 12 to 3rd, of the Supreme Court interpretation of the victory of the MPN victory and the contestation, by the UPN. So if you juxtapose these two scenarios and then the times, you will find out that truly what we have now, really, a lot of people no longer participate in election and electoral process. A lot of the technocrats are even, staying out of politics. Unlike that time, you had people who had to leave, teaching profession, who had to leave the classroom, just like Soludo had done, to go into election and, aspire to position of leadership because they also believe in the ideology of the political leadership. And that is why in the Southeast, in the Southwest, you could see, the massive improvement. Also in the Southeast, talk about Sam Bakwe, who was a teacher. What Sam Bakwe did in Old Imo, that is comprising of Abia and Ebonyi State today, no governor in those three states have been able to replicate same. What Jim Nwobodo did under the same political party, MPP, in Anambra of old until the rigging that took place in 1983 when Sisiono ousted him from office, and then Don Etebet ousted Clement Isong in Cross River State. All of those, processes you cannot compare to what we have today. What we have today is charade compared to what we had in 1979 and 1983.
Well, okay, we're wrapping up now. Let's bring in Emmanuel so that Emmanuel can help us close. Emmanuel, thanks for your patience and time. Let us in on some of the lessons Nigerians and Africans can take away from this election as the country prepares for the 2023 general election.
Well, I think the lesson that we got to learn from the Anambra State governorship election, first and foremost, is that we have to go back to the drawing board to make sufficient arrangements in the area of deployment of security operatives, in the area of using technology to try to reduce the amount of time that Nigeria government spends in order to draft those security operatives to their respective points of duty. Then secondly, we have also learned a great lesson from the election in terms of the quality of participants. The integrity of the process has significantly improved, because when you have an electoral process that has thrown up a lot of high caliber candidates running for or jostling for one office or the other, it is a very remarkable something that is worth celebrating.
All right.
Particularly in this Anambra situation, where you have almost all the candidates that came out to run in their respective parties are about the finest that you can get in any part of this country. I think it's a great lesson that Nigerians have also learned. Then secondly, the ability of the chief electoral officer to at least, they never wasted a lot of time in order to conclude the election, apart from those problems that necessitated the adjustment in the time frame.
All right, then.
You can see that even our women are actually the woman that supervised that election deserve a lot of commendation.
No doubt, no doubt. I think it's a fine place. No doubt she deserves a commendation, and I see Nigerians have been, singing praises of her. I'd like to thank you for your time. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has already congratulated the winner of that election, Charles Soludo, over his emergence as governor-elect of Anambra State. It's left to be seen if the ruling party will follow the path of the president, but you can get all the updates here on News Central Television as they pan out. Just log on to our website, newscentral.africa. Thank you for your time and company, Liborous Oshoma and Emmanuel Onwubiko. It's been a great time with you all. And to our viewers across the continent, thank you. I'm Sulaiman. Bye-bye.